Okay, afternoon everyone. My name is Suraje Dessai. I'm a professor of climate change adaptation at the University of Leeds and one of the champions of the UK Climate Resilience Programme. So welcome to our webinar series. I think some of you are returning, but some of you may be new to the series. So what we'll do today is I'll tell you a little bit about some news from the program, and then afterwards we've got Áine, Bhreasail and David Howlett from the High Level Champions team in the Race to Resilience campaign, who will come and talk to us about their Race to Resilience campaign, which is very timely given that we've got COP26 later in the year. They'll present some of the work that they've been doing on the campaign and also on the metrics. And then we'll have a little bit of a Q&A discussion afterwards. So the best way to engage is by putting your questions in the Q&A box, which you can find in your Zoom toolbar. You can post questions at any time, and please use the upvote function to vote for your favorite ones. Usually we have attendees muted, but if time allows it, we'll enable you to ask the questions directly. We record these seminars so that we can then put them in our YouTube channel. And if you have any technical problems, use the chat and we'll try to resolve that. And feel free to use the hashtag and the Twitter handle there at the bottom of your screen. So a couple of exciting news from the program. One is related to a very large piece of work that is really being finalized right now, called the UK Socioeconomic Scenarios. So that was work led by Cambridge Econometrics together with UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology and the University of Edinburgh and Exeter, where they've been producing these things are called shared socioeconomic pathways that have been developed, globally by the community, particularly involved in the IPCC, but they've been developing that for the UK to try to answer questions about resilience. So these can be combined with climate scenarios to start looking at, exposure, vulnerability, and hazard, so that we can make an assessment of climate risk. And so if you go to our website, you can actually find the narrative descriptions of what will the UK look like in 2040, 2050, all the way to 2100. Described nationally, but also for the devolved nations as well. So that's already there. You've got some fact sheets and you've got some videos describing some of those narratives. And what will come up very soon is some more data, some semi-quantitative trends, and then also some quantified projections, around, for example, population, that you'll be able to see spatially, and you'll be able to use that as well for impact and adaptation and vulnerability studies. And to inform decision making as well. So keep an eye out on the website to find out more about that. A couple of papers that I wanted to mention. One is by the group in Exeter from the CropNet project. They were looking at how farmers perceive climate change. So they've just got their paper out very recently, and again we've got a feature on our website about that very interesting work about how farmers are coping with climate variability and change. And then one of our embedded researchers, Paul O'Hare at Manchester Met, has been working with the Manchester Climate Change Agency and has recently published a framework for understanding hazard and vulnerability, particularly focusing on Manchester. So have a look at those publications. You'll get access to that through our website as well. And the final piece of advertising that I've got, it's a very busy week actually in terms of COP26 and conferences. So tomorrow we have a bumper pack of adaptation and resilience sessions at the Climate Expo, which is being organized, by the COP26 Universities Group together with Italian colleagues. So I'm just highlighting a few of our UK climate resilience program researchers or investigators. So Jim Hall, our steering committee chair, is part of the opening plenary. I'll be chairing a poster session on enablers and barriers to practice and adaptation, which will include colleagues such as Nigel Arnell and Katie Jenkins involved in our Open Clim project. Then Kate Lonsdale, the other champion of the program, is holding a session on enablers and barriers to the practice of adaptation, from mainstreaming to transformation, and it includes Paul Watkis and Kit England. And then finally in the afternoon at 3:15, we've got a session that's being run by DEFRA on the Climate Adaptation Challenge and how academics and policy professionals can work together to support UK domestic adaptation objectives. And that's chaired by the DEFRA Chief Scientist, Gideon Henderson. It includes colleagues from the National Trust, Yorkshire Water, and OECD as well. So yeah, go and register on that link, and hopefully we'll see some of you there tomorrow. So without further ado, let me just very briefly introduce Áine Bhreasail, who is an infrastructure and resilience specialist in the UN high-level climate action champion team. She's a chartered civil engineer specializing in infrastructure resilience. And let me also introduce to you David Howlett, who is a senior advisor on resilience to the UN high-level climate action champions and the co-lead of their Race to Resilience campaign. So before that, he worked at the FCDO, the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. So it's a great pleasure to have them come and talk to us about the Race to Resilience campaign. So I'll hand over to David first to take us through the campaign.
Great, thanks, Suraje, and hello to everybody. Great to be here. We're trying to do four things today. The first thing is introduce what is a high-level champion. Some of you may know, but so apologies if it's repetition. Why are we having a resilience campaign? Here we're going to highlight some of our analytical work which has been taken forward by McKinsey on behalf of the champions. It was pro bono work, which was great. I'll give a quick overview of the campaign. Áine will talk about the metrics framework, and then at the end, perhaps highlight how you might engage in the campaign. And then hopefully really interested to get your thoughts and questions. So let me just kick off with who are the champions and what do they do? Well, you can see the champions on the right of that slide. They were set up in COP21 at Paris, basically to accelerate action by this horrible term non-state actors, which is basically everybody else but national governments. The Leader Marrakesh Partnership, which again is a partnership of those organisations trying to take action. Important to note, they're appointed by their presidency. So Nigel was appointed by UK Prime Minister, Gonzalo by the President of Chile. But they're UN champions, so they're not directly working to their respective governments. And they've set up a team which Áine and myself are part of. We're not employed by governments. They've raised funds from philanthropy and also secondees. Áine's seconded from Resilience Shift and from Arup, and we have a whole range of other people supporting us in different ways. And they've come up with two campaigns: Race to Zero and Race to Resilience. And they've got some pretty ambitious overall goals. I won't go through all the details, but the key one is number one, to increase actions by non-state actors by at least tenfold on net resilience, net zero commitments, and
I think we may have lost David. Áine, do you think you could pick up from here?
Sure thing, yeah. So as David mentioned, so there's several priorities that the climate champions have. That number one there on the increase in commitments is the really key one, but also looking at driving industrial systems transformation for 10 different sectors. Oh, David's back, but I'll share screen separately.
Sorry, my internet's not working, but if someone else can run the slides for me, that would be great.
Sure thing.
Yeah, so I was just talking about the sector work, and there's nine sectors. I do apologize for my internet dropping, and now on my phone. Yeah, so let's maybe move to the next slide. So we have, there's a whole set of sectoral teams in the Champions team, all working on these different areas. We've got some fantastic pathways to 1.5 degree resilient world. We can share the links to those, and they're going through another reiteration. It'll be great to have more inputs into those. Importantly, there's a whole pathway on resilience, cuts across all of those themes. Anyway, let me move on now to talk more about the next issue and why we're having a race to resilience. So next slide, please. And maybe the next slide. Yeah, the first thing is, and again, as I was saying earlier, this is some new analysis done by McKinsey for us. It's not published yet, but there's a methodology behind it, and we'll be sharing more on this. But the crucial message here is, we need to do it now. There's 3.5 billion people exposed to climate hazards. And this is going to change. Next slide, please. So this is a comparison with if we get to a 2 degree world in 2050, we'll also be coming up with data for 2030. But you can see, while there's 3.5 billion people exposed now, only 2% to severe risks. In a 2 degree world, we'll have 1 billion people exposed. And also, even if we get to 1.5 degree world, we still have 800 million people exposed. So the challenge is going to increase. And I'm assuming most people are probably aware of this, but let's go on to the next slide as well. It affects everybody. So there we got to, this is data around drought and heat stress. Basically everybody in the world is going to be affected to some extent. And the next slide, this is data from Swiss Re. It's going to impact on economies everywhere, but they can also see, you start to see the inequity in this, that the impact is going to be greater in certain regions. ASEAN, obviously, bigger loss than compared to Europe or North America. So, it's something which is global. That's why Race to Resilience campaign is a global campaign. Next slide, please. This is also crucial. And again, the most vulnerable are most exposed to the risk. So that's people living particularly in developing countries, small and developing states, and those types of countries. And again, the next slide also is striking. Yeah, they're the least responsible. So, the ones with the highest vulnerability, they contribute 9% of emissions between for 10 years, 2006 to 2016. The countries which contributed the most, probably including ourselves, are ones with the lowest vulnerability. So this just demonstrates the whole issue of a just transition, climate justice, which, people impacted by climate change aren't the ones who've largely caused it. So that's another reason why the campaign is focusing on the most vulnerable places. It's also why we need two races: a race to zero, because the first way to reduce the impacts is to keep to 1.5 degree world. So that's why race to zero is important. And then why we need a race to resilience, because impacts are going to occur and we need to make people more resilient and help them adapt to the impacts of climate change. So let me just take you through quickly through race to resilience. Next slide. Next slide. It's in campaign, it's led focusing on non-state actors. It's an equal campaign to the Champions Race to Zero. It's launched by Alex Sharma, president of the COP in January, with Bridget Espinosa and former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Let's move on. What's its goals? Next slide. vision by 2050, everybody is going to be able to thrive and in the face of climate change. So thrive is important, not survive. It's a 10-year campaign, and the goal is by 2030 we can demonstrate we've helped build the resilience of 4 billion people's lives, from the most vulnerable groups to climate change. So that includes often many in developing countries, but also includes people whether in the UK or the US or other more developed countries. And we do that by engaging thousands of businesses and civil society, and also people like some of you on this call from the knowledge side and academia. Next slide, please. Important, how does it link with the presidency? Very closely linked. There's two campaigns. There's an adaptation action coalition led by the UK and Egypt to mobilize action by states, race to resilience to mobile action by non-state actors. So they're both responding to, one of the goals for Glasgow is on adaptation, respond to that, and also the current UN Secretary General, he has strong priorities on this, and we work very closely with the FCDR and the COP26 unit. Particularly, also we've been looking at how do we start to run the events, and you may want to know more about that. But next slide. Three themes, pillars: urban resilience, rural resilience, coastal resilience. That also includes riverine resilience. So probably covers everybody. So those are the sort of the driving theme pillars of the campaign. Next slide, please. How does it work? It works by initiatives joining. An initiative is a sort of coalition or alliance wanting to take action, grounding actors to come together, setting milestones, and Áine will talk more about the metrics side and how we asking people to contribute to that 4 billion metric thing. That is, as many of you know, it's a challenge. What is metrics on resilience adaptation? Not easy. We want to drive investment forwards. Next slide, please. Again, I mentioned already how you can join. If your initiative, you pledge your commitments, you plan to achieve them, you proceed, and you publish. So we can share the links to all of these, and it'll probably come a bit clear on the next following slides. Next slide, please. So currently we asked for expression just to join. We had a fantastic response. Champions have selected currently 21 that has that breakdown across the different themes. Currently 1,500 members. I think it's probably going up to 10,000. It goes from the large corporates to NGOs and also to many civil society organizations. So it's a multi-stakeholder approach with global outreach. And then, for example, we have things like the Mangrove Alliance bringing in a whole different set of actors to take action there. But more details will be shown on our web soon. But next slide, let's dwell on this one a little bit. These are the initiatives which have been approved so far. You may be aware of some of these. You may be part of them because they're open to UK organisations as they are open to others. So we have some clear on agriculture, like Agri 1.5, that's led by the World Business Council Sustainable Development. Ocean Risk Resilience Action Alliance, that's Ocean Unite, Global Resilience Partnership, and AXA Excel. And you may find yourselves in some of those. We're also looking at how we have perhaps the Resilience Knowledge Coalition coming in to underpin race and resilience on the knowledge side, and a whole range of other actors coming in as sort of supporters or accelerators to the race to resilience. Next slide, please. Oh, so that's enough from me, and hopefully my internet will come back. I'll try and come back on my computer, but over to you, Áine. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. And yeah, thanks for that. As Suraje said, I'm also with the Climate Champions team, and I'm seconded in from the Resilience Shift. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the metrics framework that we're using for all of those initiatives that David talked about, and what we're asking them to commit to and to report to. And this metrics framework is really critical for the success of the campaign. We have several aims for this framework to enable ambitious campaign goals from all of those initiatives and to mobilize action, to record and track pledges and results, to identify gaps that need to be filled by new and existing initiatives, and then also to ensure that the data that is provided is reliable and that the impact of the campaign is credible. But beyond this, we believe that there's a space that this framework could fill by becoming a more widely adopted measurement framework that would support engagement by businesses, investors, and other key actors. So there are some challenges to implement a framework like this that I'm sure you'll no doubt be aware of. And these include the fact that resilience, it's a complex, multifaceted concept, covers a range of hazard types, socioeconomic circumstances, and units of engagement as well. And there's no real consensus on definitions of resilience or other key concepts, such as adaptation, with numerous different versions being used by different actors. Neither is there a universally agreed measurement approach for resilience or for attributing resilience to a project or a program activity. And there are also significant barriers for non-specialist actors, thinking here especially of the private sector, in effectively measuring resilience and adaptation. And these are all things that we were aware of when we put together this framework with the help of McKinsey as well. So what we did was we developed these metrics for the campaign that act as the kind of the first universal framework to capture resilience outcomes. And the key metric is resilient individuals. Remembering our overall goal that David mentioned is that by 2030, we want to catalyse action by non-state actors that builds the resilience of 4 billion people from groups and communities that are vulnerable to climate risks. But as well as resilient individuals, we're also measuring companies, countries and regions, cities and natural systems. And if all goes well, what we would like to see is that in 2030, we would have something like a dashboard like this. These figures are purely illustrative because the campaign was launched in January. But what we would like to see is obviously that we would have reached our goal of 4 billion people by 2030 with increased resilience. But we would also be looking at the number of companies, countries, cities, hectares of natural systems, finance mobilized and deployed, and also organizations that have signed up to the Race to Resilience initiatives. So future pledges and outcomes of initiatives will be mapped against our latest understanding of the resilience need. And David talked a little bit about the piece of work on analytics that was looking at resilience needs, and that's what's shown here on the left. And we'd like to compare the pledges and actions that the initiatives take with that need and show, for example, what our pledges add up to and where there are gaps. So here we've taken data from the analytics workstream on the left here. The pledge and action data is illustrative as we're still gathering that data. And for example, what we've shown here is the number of individuals who are vulnerable to drought in a 2-degree world, broken down those into Asia, India, and by gender. We hope to compare this to the pledges that the initiatives make and in time to the actions that they take as well. And this is why we're asking them to provide a fair bit of segmented data where they can. So how we've put together this framework, we have worked with McKinsey, as I mentioned. They did a literature review, including case studies of several frameworks, metric landscape mapping, scoping of the Race to Resilience campaign metric requirements. They interviewed several experts on kind of identification of best practices and key challenges in the measurement of climate resilience, and developed a list of guiding design principles. After that, they produced and tested design choice hypotheses through follow-up meetings with those experts, and finalized the design choices and developed metrics. We then road tested the metrics with 11 of those member initiatives who their logos are shown here. And we also surveyed the first batch of initiatives that have joined the campaign and got their feedback on the metrics framework. And then we iterated it based on that feedback. We have also convened an 11-member technical working group to iterate and to validate the metrics. This group is led by IIED and the University of Maryland, and it also includes some initiative representatives that can advise us on the deployment of the metrics framework. So just to tell you a little bit more about the methodology advisory group. So their role is to validate the content of the race resilience metrics framework. And as I mentioned, to help us figure out the best way of deploying that to the partner initiatives. And they're doing that at 3 stages. In advance of our first consultation phase with the initiatives, which they have already done. And then in advance of when we actually request the initiatives to apply the matrix, to gather the data and to share with us. And then also after COP, they're going to review how it went. And this is led by Aditya Bahadur and Emily Beauchamp at IED, and also by Professor Anand Patwardhan at University of Maryland. And it also has some members representing initiatives such as GRP, OP2B and more. I think I have a list here of who. Yes, so this is our list of our advisory, the makeup of our advisory group. And there are more to be added based on requests from the group itself, including more members representing grassroots and Global South voices. So just one more thing on how can you engage in Race to Resilience? And there are several different ways. So that is as a Race Resilience member, that would be part of one of those partner initiatives that David mentioned. We are looking, there will be more partner initiatives joining as well over the coming weeks and months. And so there's another way is to join an initiative that's already part of a Race to Resilience initiative, to ask initiatives that you're already a part of to take or to increase the action that they're taking on resilience, so that these can qualify to join Race to Resilience. And if there's no initiative relevant to you that's part of the that's already a partner, you can look to set up a new one. Another way is by helping to organise and convene Race to Resilience events, including at COP. We're also looking to for people to share, and that we can help the initiatives benefit from knowledge on best practice and resilience for communities and locally led action. And then finally, to collaborate to identify new opportunities for transformative actions to build resilience as well. So for more information, you can go to our website or drop us an email, and we would be very happy to answer any questions you have.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Áine and David. There are various questions coming in. Let me just, I think one of our colleagues in the program, Liz Sharp, had a question. I am actually going to allow you to ask the question, Liz. So you could, if you just unmute yourself, you could ask the question directly to David and Áine.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, so I guess I suppose I'm struck by how the idea of increased resilience is quite a loose term, and I'm interested in kind of, I guess it's just some of the detail that either I didn't properly hear or you didn't have time to fully articulate. How you measure that, or whether you've just decided that you actually want it to be quite loose because you're just starting off. And you know, because I suppose I tend to think of resilience on more the things like social capital, connectivity, community cohesion. But a lot of colleagues will think of it about, does somebody have a floodgate? And so I'm kind of interested in you talking about both forms of resilience. Are you just looking for, basically any form of resilience to any extent? Because, there would also perhaps be the critique that none of these are going to make much difference in terms of what we're facing. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much for the question. So we have a definition of resilience that we're using as a campaign, and that is the ability to prepare for, navigate, recover from, and bounce back better from climate hazards, events, or disturbances. But in terms of increased resilience, that's pretty initiative and context specific. So we're asking initiatives to confirm that what the actions that they're taking, that it aligns with either the Marrakesh Partnership climate actions, which are in those pathways that David mentioned, or the IPCC AR5 actions typology. So there's a huge range within that, but we're asking that they confirm that the actions they're taking actually align with that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks, that's very useful, yeah.
And maybe linked to this, if I may ask a question here as chair, I was wondering, for example, I mean, non-state actors are incredibly diverse. So you've got private companies, you've got cities, you've got NGOs. So when someone comes to the campaign, I mean, do you support them in trying to establish a baseline, for example, I guess, upon which then you have, you're trying to build resilience from? Because I presume, each member would have to have some sort of baseline upon which they then pledge, okay, we're going to become resilient compared to this. Is this something you folks support them in doing?
David, do you want to grab this question?
No, I think one thing to flag on this conversation is that, just because we can't measure resilience or adaptation well, doesn't mean we shouldn't start focusing on action. Obviously the net zero campaign has a nice sort of metric around CO2 equivalent. So I think what we're trying to drive through the race is a framework which sort of starts to work, and we need to develop. And we'd also could end up with a whole series of sort of more sectoral targets, 100, 200 million smallholder farmers having access to this, 1 billion people having access to early warning, heatwave plans in place by cities. So there's going to be lots of complexity underneath this. So in answer to your question, we're a small team, so we can't support everybody to do all of this, but we'll be looking to do that. And also, crucially, it's really interesting when you speak to some businesses. Some businesses get, what you mean we got.
Don't know if you want to try to fill in the gap there, Áine.
Yeah, I guess I'm not quite sure what the end of the point was there.
Yeah, I'm back actually. So yeah, so the apologies for I'm gonna have to do something with my router. It keeps dropping in and out. But yeah. So there's the real opportunity to take this forwards and to work, particularly some of you are working on the knowledge side. How do we do this? And I was talking about businesses. Some businesses, they can, they know people in their value chains or their clients. Others are more challenging. It's also challenging maybe for somewhere people just have targets on hectares of land restored or preserved. What's the impact on people? We're also trying to have metrics around nature embedded into this. But as you're seeing from Áine's presentation, this is definitely work in progress, and it's a considerable challenge. And having coming up with there is a rationale why where we got that 4 billion figure number from as well. But, and you wouldn't have probably got a government-led campaign coming out with that sort of headline figure, because the next question, no one's asking, yes, where's all the financing going to come to build all this? That is crucial, both from the private sector and the public sector. So this is an opportunity to really mobilize all our efforts. I saw a question in the chat about what does this mean more for UK organisations. I think a number are already in Race to Resilience, and so there is opportunity to come into this. There's opportunity to come in on the knowledge side, to how do we improve the metrics, how do we make sure them work? Because many people in science say you can't do this, so you can't, you can't measure things, so you can't move forwards. But every organisation, a business, a city, will say, yeah, we know we need to adapt and build resilience, and then they want to measure it. So this goes back to Elizabeth's question: is how do we support people to have something which is really which is taking things forwards, but has basis in science and evidence, but also gets over this real challenge of the complexity. Let me stop there, and I'll stay on my phone now, so I don't keep dropping in and out. So.
Thanks, David. Just to kind of add to that, I think Elizabeth had a follow-up question on collecting information about, are we collecting information on about how members are measuring resilience in their context? And this will be useful for everyone to know. So we are asking them, which Marrakesh action or IPCC actions typology, which it aligns to. We are also at the moment looking at validating, looking at how that can be validated. Is there a way that the resilience outcome of the recipient group can have that validated? And so we are asking them for details on that. We don't want to be prescriptive as a campaign, because obviously resilience actions can take such a wide range, but we are asking for some of that data.
Okay, great. And there was one question, I think, from Matt about cities, and I was just trying to maybe think a bit about, I mean, given you've got a limited team, I mean, how do you get to decide, I guess, who's part of the campaign and who's not? I mean, is there a limit to the number of?
Yeah, well, we've obviously we've deliberately gone down that we want initiatives, alliances, networks, coalitions to join. So you can't join as an individual university, company, or civil society organisation. You need to be part of something which is taking action. So on the cities, we're getting around maybe one main entry point, which is I forgot, Cities for Net Zero on resilience, but that's led by C40, GCOM, going to come from mayors, and then we have ICLEI as well. So try and bring people together on that. And then on the region side, we have regions for ADAPT wanting to come in, and a region would include, so as you mentioned, the devolved administration, so Scotland, if they wanted to could become a member of Race to Resilience for regions. And the key thing is to get everybody driving towards, this challenge of building resilience. Should we use the term resilient or resilience? Because we want people to be, you want to live in a resilient city, you want to be a resilient person. So those are the real opportunities, and obviously it's the real challenges, because again, with the net zero campaign, they're just focusing really on the one metric, although there's lots of complexity behind all of that. It's not, let's not underestimate that. But I think I've been working on adaptation for a long time, at DFID and then FCDO and at Global Resilience Partnership, and a spell of time at Leeds myself on food security and resilience. We are behind the curve, particularly in the COP process, and you see it in the financing flows. Most money goes on mitigation, very little on adaptation. And the COP presidency this year really want to make it put adaptation, mitigation on the part as to the champion. So there's some real opportunities here, and to use sort of Race to Resilience more, as a campaign or building a movement for action. But and also on the research side, I think some of you may be aware that there's an adaptation research alliance which has been set up, and I've already mentioned the Resilience Knowledge Coalition, which is about how getting new knowledge into use. So we really wanted to mobilise the probably the constituency you're often working with. And talking, and at Glasgow, I mentioned as we talked earlier, I used to have a resilience hub where we bring people together, linked into the adaptation day the presidency is launching, linked into things like the Met Office and UKRI might be doing in the green zone, which is the non-negotiating space, the blue zone. But crucially, we'd love anybody who's interested in engaging with us on this, we'd love to hear from you, because we're going to have a large virtual element for COP26 come what may, and we're planning on that now. And the more we can bring people into the tent, more people are taking action and sharing knowledge, building cooperation. That's what the champions really want to see under Race to Resilience. And then for sectors which I'm most involved in, food and agriculture, cuts across mitigation and adaptation. You can't think of an agricultural system which is just net zero or just resilient. It has to be both. And then there's wider impacts agriculture on biodiversity, which we need to bring in. Let me stop there, because it'd be great to hear any other thoughts and ideas, comments or questions, and we can share more of our contacts, and we can share where you can find more details of the Marrakesh Partnership pathways. Over.
Thanks, David. Karina, would you like to answer your question directly? You just need to unmute if you're there. Otherwise, I'll read that out. Okay. I don't see her unmuting. So are there ways to get involved beyond metrics and pledging? We're a global community of practice for urban resilience professionals, but unsure whether there's ways to support this beyond spreading the word if we don't necessarily ladder up to existing reporting mechanisms. So I guess there's a lot of practitioners out there who could potentially contribute, perhaps in consultancies or even in NGOs. How could they best engage with the campaign?
Let me have a go answering that as well. Yeah. Well, the first thing is get the campaign known. So let's not underestimate the importance of using Race to Resilience to underline why resilience matters to many. I think if we look at the business sector, some businesses understand it, others don't. So that is really, really crucial. But we've had similar questions from others. Other professional associations. How do they engage? I think one is where we're looking to have, perhaps we might call them accelerators, supporters, bringing in knowledge and best practice. And obviously, Áine's linked to Resilience Shift. They're looking at standards and best practice on resilience infrastructure. So there's a really important role here in terms of the how. So how do we bring the best knowledge and practice to industry which are there? And so that is an opportunity. And also potentially we're looking at a sort of route where people who can't necessarily meet all the metrics considerations, but come in to drive transformations. For example, we have a well-known company on fintech wanting to come in, how to democratize finance. We have others coming in, how to bring local level adaptation principles forward, others on climate justice. So there's going to be other ways to engage. And hopefully many of the practitioners that I think it was at Green was talking about, they'll be part of organizations. So how do they get their organizations to be joining Race to Resilience initiatives? And we're currently in a second round of expression of interest. So there'll be more coming, and there'll probably more places for businesses to go to as we go forwards. But it is this campaign is up and running, but it is developing, and it's not just a campaign to Glasgow. It's a campaign for the future, and for the Nigel Topping will then be joined by an African champion from whichever country is the president of the African COP, which will be next year, hopefully, that will be building a legacy for what happens in the future. But I think it's, all the questions we've got, is how do you build the resilience of 4 billion people? Well, how do we do it? So, and can we drive Race to do that? clearly it also needs action by governments. So there's an ambition up here. So if non-state actors are doing things, how do then governments come in to support that and drive more ambition? And there's definitely going to be public finance and private finance needed to deliver some of these targets. It's not all going to be done by private investors and civil society. It is about that. But so that's what the champions also do, how to build the links between the states, which are called parties in the COP presidency, in the COPs, with the non-state actors. Over.
David, Karina, I think you've got your raised hand. Did you want to come back on this question? Can't hear you. So I'm going to move on to Paul O'Hare, who's one of our embedded researchers. Paul, do you want to ask your excellent question directly to Áine, or otherwise if you can't unmute yourself, I'll do it. So how can we get involved?
Yeah.
Go for it, Paul. Yeah.
Hi there. Thanks, everybody. I'm getting a bit of feedback here. I'll close that down. Yeah, my question is, how can we get involved in the discussion around the development of the metrics? David, you mentioned that, and I think Áine, you said as you flashed up an email address. And what is the kind of time frame for that as well? And I think you said post COP26. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there's a few kind of milestones in our metrics framework development. We have our first draft that we are now consulting with the initiatives on, and we're doing that over the month of May. We'll go back to our methodology advisory group, that table of people I flashed their names up. We'll go back to them in June with recommended changes based on what the initiatives have told us, and the methodology advisory group, I'm sure as well, will have other changes that they would like to make. One of which actually comes back to another question that was asked. So I'll cover that in a second. So then that's going to be in June. We'll then ask the initiatives to start reporting in July. There'll be a couple of months of reporting, and we'll ask them by the end of the summer to have sent us their data. We'll then collate that, present at COP the different pledges and actions that have been taken. After COP, we'll have a review of how it went and what needs to be changed over the next 9 years up to 2030. So that's the kind of the time scale for the metrics framework.
Maybe I can also add, Paul, another thing which we did mention is that we also have a technical secretariat which has just been appointed, and that's led by the University of Chile. Their climate change research center, I can't remember the full title offhand, but most importantly, actually, the champions want to have an expert review group to support them on the campaign in terms of reviewing expressions of interest, how the progress is going. And we're just going through a process. There'll be an open call for nominations from that, which will be run by University of Chile. So that's going to be another way, ideally about 12 to 15 people across the globe. So we get really good representative. But no, we're really pleased that we have the University of Chile supporting Race to Resilience. Race to Zero has the University of Oxford, and we're pleased we have a university from the global south doing that. But that will be another opportunity. And Suraje, we can share details of that when there is a call for nominations through this network. But it'd be great to have the best people on that. And we also, by expert, we're also including people who got from community level experience to academic experience to practical experience. So the term expert we're using not in maybe the classical expert process. Thank you.
If I could just come back to, there was a question on characteristics of resilience, which I think is related. So that question was basically the characteristics of resilience: high diversity, effective governance, community involvement, preparedness and planning, etc. Are we identifying the characteristics for different contexts as part of the approach? So this is something that Aditya has brought up. So obviously you're on the same page as Aditya there. We have at the moment asked all of the initiatives to consider this in the actions that they're taking. We haven't asked them to report this in terms of just trying to make sure that the level of what they're reporting is appropriate to what we need. I think we've been asked by the methodology advisory group to maybe make that idea of the characteristics of resilience a bit more prominent in the campaign. So we're looking at ways to do that. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Áine. I'm gonna maybe take ask two quick questions before we wrap up. One is quite practical, I guess, and it is about, it'd be useful to hear a little bit how your campaign relates to, for example, the Paris Agreement's global goal on adaptation and the Global Commission on Adaptation, who've kind of been advocating, an acceleration of adaptation resilience. It'd be interesting to see how the campaign interfaces with those two initiatives. And then the second one is much more academic. Early next year, the IPCC 6th assessment report will come out. You'll see there a whole bunch of definitions about adaptation, resilience, and transformation. And those things are kind of defined in different ways. So I guess broadly speaking, people talk a little bit about adaptation as being incremental. Resilience is kind of maintaining the shape of the system, bouncing from shocks and coming back to a particular state. And then the final one, transformation, where you're really transforming the system, transforming people's views and worldviews. It'd be interesting to hear a bit, in that spectrum of kind of incremental to transformation, what is the sort of ambition of the campaign? Because you do have that, you're trying to build resilience of 4 billion people. It's very ambitious. So is that more transformative or is that more incremental? It'd be good to hear your views on that. And yeah, so a few minutes on that, folks. That would be great.
Okay, let me perhaps have a first go, then Áine perhaps might come in. The first is the global goal on adaptation, and also there's other questions behind that. It's like the loss and damage side of the negotiation. So the global goal on adaptation, framed in Paris, but has no metrics, and obviously, it's sort of not up for negotiation. But the way we see it is that by mobilizing action, we'll be contributing to building adaptation in countries and regions most impacted by climate change. We're not trying to set out that the 4 billion figure is the global goal on adaptation. If people want to use the framework we developed to help inform that, that will be fine. And the same with loss and damage, that's really important, but we see if we can get more action being taken place to avoid future loss and damage, that's great. While the negotiations we're looking at that, and obviously, the COP presidency is focusing on that, and I think their campaign is going to be called Adaptation, Loss and Damage, as opposed to Adaptation Resilience. So we're, and because we're not part of the negotiations, we're sort of, what we're focusing is action which delivers resilience, delivers the global goal, however you define it. Because some people want to define the global goal as transfer of funds from the rich north to the rich south, and there's nothing. And the same on the compensation. If you're living in Tuvalu or Kiribati and your island disappears, well, who's going to compensate you for that? But there's obviously lots of challenges around the loss and damage side. But crucially, I see we just need to take more action, get more investment happening, and also importantly for Nigel and Gonzalo, there's $100 billion a year figure from Paris that needs to be delivered, and private sector needs to come into that. But that, I think, from when I'm listening to the champions, they see that as that's not sufficient. We need to get to trillions of investments to shape. 100 billion sounds a lot, but it's not enough. So we're trying to drive ambition beyond what is perhaps outside the negotiations, which is a really important point to note. Global Commission on Adaptation, well, a lot of that 4 billion figure sort of comes from that. Local adaptation came from that. So a lot of stuff has fed from that. And also we have the Global Centre on Adaptation, which came out of that. But many of the partners who are in the Commission, and actually should have flagged, we've got we've got ambassadors appointed, and 2 of those ambassadors, Emma Howard-Boyd, the chair of the UK Environment, was on the Commission, as was Sheila Patel from Sunderland's International, former chair of that. So we have close links on that. IPPC, we point people to definitions of adaptation and resilience in IPPC is crucial. And also expecting the AR6 to be really underpinning the reason to drive more action on resilience. It's interesting going to be seeing how the McKinsey work links into what comes of the IPCC process as well. But I don't know, Áine, if you want to add anything to those really important questions.
I guess I just add that we definitely see the campaign as more on the transformational side, and especially thinking about how the different sectors are going to transform. And we're looking for examples or breakthroughs that people think should be made. David mentioned accelerators. So, if there are companies or initiatives that have a resource behind them to try and put a breakthrough forward that would move the goal and move us closer to the goal, then we want to support that as well.
Okay, thank you very much, David and Áine. That's been really, really illuminating the last hour. It's sort of flown by. So thanks for answering all the questions and presenting the campaign to us. I'm sure people will email you directly as well. So I think what rests me, the final thing I'd like to say is just about our next webinars. So in a couple of weeks' time, we've got Murray Dale from JBA Consulting coming to talk to us about climate services and the work they've been doing on defining standards and monitoring and valuing climate services. And then 2 weeks later, we have CropNet, Richard Pywell from UK Centre Ecology and Hydrology coming to tell us a bit about the project that they've completed on monitoring and predicting the effects of climate change on crop yields. So at the bottom there, you've got the usual link to the webinar series where you can register. So thank you very much everyone for attending. As I said in the beginning, this has been recorded, so we'll hopefully put this on YouTube by the end of the week or early next week. So thank you very much for attending and contributing your questions. And once again, thank you, David and Áine. And we look forward to engaging with the campaign. And see you in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.